I want you to look closely at a specific date. It's sort of buried in the dense legalese of the new filing from the Southern District of New York, but if you blink, you miss it.
Right.
Jeffrey Epstein's defense team didn't just ask for his files back. They filed a formal request to the Central Intelligence Agency and the National Security Agency for, and I'm quoting here, proof of affiliation, covering the years 1999 to 2011.
And let's just stop right there, because we can't gloss over that phrase.
No.
That specific request, proof of affiliation, it completely changes the genre of this entire story. We are no longer looking at a true crime story about a predator on an island.
What are we looking at then?
We are looking at a spy thriller. Full stop.
Okay, explain that distinction for us, because to the average person, or, even the average lawyer, that might just sound like standard discovery language.
It is anything but standard. I mean, think about it. When you ask the most secretive, most powerful intelligence agencies on the planet for proof of affiliation, you're not asking if a relationship existed.
You already know it did.
You know it existed. You're asking for the receipts. You were literally asking for the payroll logs, the handler reports, the travel authorizations.
You're asking for the documents that prove you were following orders.
Exactly. It's the get-out-of-jail-free card. You're effectively standing up in court and saying, I was your employee, now prove it so I don't go down for this alone. It's a threat.
And the response from the agencies, because they didn't simply say no, that's the key here.
No, they didn't. They gave the classic Glomar response.
We can neither confirm nor deny the existence of such records.
Right. And in the world of intelligence, that is not a denial. Not even close. If I ask the CIA if they have a file on my grandmother, they'll just say no.
Sure.
When they say we can neither confirm nor deny, it is practically a signed confession of classified entanglement. They're saying, we can't tell you because simply confirming the relationship would breach national security.
So the relationship itself is a state secret.
Precisely. And here is where it gets, frankly, terrifying. Why does a legal filing from a dead man matter today, February 16th, 2026?
It's the central question.
Because the network didn't die with him. That's the mistake everyone makes.
Yeah.
The same blackmail architecture, the same web of compromise that protected him then. It's potentially steering the United States toward a nuclear confrontation with Iran right now.
The leverage hasn't disappeared.
No, it just moved. It moved from the bedroom to the Situation Room.
Welcome to the Hot News Channel, where we strip away the noise to analyze today's breaking stories. It is February 16th, 2026.
And today we are doing a masterclass in connecting the dots.
We really are. We're looking at a major convergence. You have what people call the deep state domestic cover-ups, and they are colliding head-on with the exploding geopolitical powder kegs we are seeing in Ukraine and the Middle East.
And the glue, the thing holding this whole terrifying structure together, is blackmail. It's always blackmail.
For this deep dive, we have combed through a massive stack of sources. We've got incredible reporting from investigative journalists like Tara Palmieri.
Deep geopolitical analysis from some real heavyweights, people like Ray McGovern and Pepe Escobar.
And we've also been scrubbing the transcripts from those recent and frankly disastrous hearings involving Attorney General Pam Bondi.
So let's start at the beginning of the thread, the intelligence nexus.
Right. For years, the whole Epstein was intel theory. It was treated as, a fringe conspiracy, tinfoil hat stuff. But now, according to the reporting by Tara Palmieri, there is this specific legal filing from the new document dump that just changes the entire narrative.
It doesn't just change it, it validates the darkest theories. As we said in the open, Epstein's lawyers formally requested proof of affiliation. But I want to drill down on those dates you mentioned.
1999 to 2011.
1999 to 2011. The outlier there, the one that should make everyone's hair stand on end, is 2011.
Right, because Jeffrey Epstein was convicted in Florida in 2008. He went to jail, passed for jail anyway. He was a registered sex offender.
Precisely. In a normal world, or even in a normal criminal conspiracy, an asset who gets caught is burned. They're done.
You cut them loose?
You cut them loose immediately. You discard them. The agency cuts all ties to protect the institution. But Epstein's lawyers were requesting proof of affiliation, extending 3 years past his conviction.
So what does that imply? That they kept him on the payroll? That he was still useful?
It implies active utility. That's the only conclusion. It implies that even as a known convicted sex offender, he was still valuable to the intelligence apparatus. He was still on the clock between 2008 and 2011.
That's astounding.
It is. And Tara Palmieri brings in a former CIA clandestine officer, John Cipher, to analyze this, which is just invaluable insight.
Because Cipher knows how the agency actually speaks, how it operates from the inside.
Right. And he points out something very specific about the meetings Epstein was having during this period.
The meetings with heads of state, top scientists, foreign diplomats.
All of that. But here is the tell, the hard data point, Cipher flags. Epstein was meeting them without analysts present.
Now, why does that matter so much? To a layperson, a private meeting is just a private meeting.
In the official world of diplomacy and intelligence, no, it's not. If a legitimate U.S. representative meets a foreign leader or a high-level asset, there is always a note-taker. There's an analyst in the room. There's a record.
The CIA wants to know exactly what was said so they can analyze the intelligence.
Of course. That's the whole point. When you meet without those people, you are operating in the gray zone. Cipher calls it an informal relationship.
Informal relationship sounds like a very polite CIA euphemism.
It's the ultimate euphemism.
Yep.
In the trade, we'd call them an asset, plain and simple. But Palmieri uses another term in her reporting to describe Epstein's role that I think just frames this perfectly. She calls him hyperfixer.
A hyperfixer. Okay, let's break that down. What does that mean in this context?
Think of the geopolitical world as a series of locked doors. You have different silos. Scientists don't naturally talk to skies. Diplomats don't usually hang out with, shady financiers or arms dealers.
They move in different circles.
Completely different circles. A hyperfixer is the person with the skeleton key. He's the intermediary who can move between these worlds without raising alarms, or at least without raising the wrong kind of alarms.
So Epstein wasn't just a donor, he was a human bridge.
A human bridge. That's a great way to put it. He could introduce a Nobel-winning physicist to a prime minister at a dinner party, and in the process, he could gather information on both of them.
And compromise both of them.
That's the real currency. The compromise is the goal. A hyperfixer doesn't just make the introduction, he secures the leverage.
Which brings us to perhaps the most damning piece of evidence that connects this to the current administration.
The Bill Burns connection.
The current sitting director of the CIA.
The director. The man at the top. The mainstream media is doing, absolute backflips to ignore this, but the document dump shows Bill Burns was texting Jeffrey Epstein.
Okay, now hold on. I want to play devil's advocate for a moment here. People text each other. Is it possible they were just acquaintances, maybe discussing a charity event or something innocuous?
Context is everything.
No.
It's not plausible.
Yeah.
You are the head of the world's most powerful intelligence agency. You do not text a known convicted sex trafficker unless you have a very, very specific and probably sanctioned reason.
And Burns is a career diplomat. He's not some newcomer.
He is a man who has spent his entire life understanding the risk of a digital footprint. He knows better than anyone that everything is recorded. So the fact that he was comfortable creating a digital record text messages with Epstein suggests one of two things.
Which are?
Either he's incredibly stupid, which he's not, or he felt protected. It suggests the relationship was sanctioned from on high. It was part of the job.
So it begs the billion-dollar question, what was the product? If the CIA is the consumer, what was Epstein selling to Bill Burns?
And that is the terrifying realization we all have to grapple with. If the CIA was using Epstein, and we know Epstein's primary business was sexual blackmail compromise, then
the CIA was effectively outsourcing the entrapment of foreign and domestic leaders.
Yes, they weren't stopping the crime. They were harvesting the fruit of the crime. The blackmail material was the intelligence product.
Which completely recontextualizes the so-called failure of law enforcement and intelligence to stop him for decades.
It wasn't a failure to catch him. It was a refusal to shut down the operation. Because the operation was working. It was providing valuable leverage.
Wow. And if you think that's dark, we have to look at the email that journalists Sabby Sabs and Whitney Webb have been reporting on. The one from September 2001.
Yeah, this is a whole other level.
This one actually made my stomach drop when I read the initial report. We are talking about an email sent to Ghislaine Maxwell.
On September 18th, 2001, 1 week after 9/11, the towers are still smoking in Lower Manhattan. The country is in a state of absolute chaos and shock.
And a journalist named Ed Epstein, no relation to Jeffrey, sends an email to Ghislaine Maxwell about a secret investigation involving the 9/11 Commission.
It's just I mean, why? Why is the daughter of Robert Maxwell, a legendary Mossad super spy, why is she being looped into top-secret 9/11 investigations while the dust is literally still settling?
It suggests her role was far more significant than just a socialite or, Epstein's girlfriend.
It suggests she was a handler. She was an intelligence operative in her own right.
Yeah.
If the Maxwell-Epstein network was that deeply plugged into the narrative control of 9/11 from day one, then we are dealing with a deep state structure that doesn't just manage isolated crimes. It manages global events.
The family business. Robert Maxwell was Mossad. Ghislaine was effectively his successor, his handler in the field. Epstein was the front man.
And here they are, intimately tied to the narrative control, the investigation of the single biggest event in modern American history. It's staggering.
It really is, and it raises a critical question for today, for February 2026. Why is this all surfacing now? Why are we suddenly seeing the proof of affiliation request and the 911 emails come to light?
I think it's because the system is breaking. The whole blackmail structure is cracking under its own weight. It's become too big, too unwieldy.
And the people in charge right now are panicking.
They're panicking. They are desperately trying to put the toothpaste back in the tube, and it is getting very, very messy, which brings us right to the domestic cover-up.
It is getting incredibly messy. And we have to start with Attorney General Pam Bondi. We've been looking at sources from Mario Nawfal and the program Due Dissidents who've analyzed her recent hearing.
Disaster doesn't even begin to cover it. It was a political catastrophe.
You have the Attorney General of the United States in the year 2026 sitting before Congress. The Epstein files are arguably the biggest, most explosive story in the world.
And she refused to answer a single substantive question.
Not one. She wouldn't answer about the magician redactions, the ones pointing to David Copperfield. She wouldn't answer about the timeline for releasing more files, just stonewalled.
The analogy that Due Dissidents used is perfect here. They said she brought a butter knife to a gunfight.
That's a great way to put it.
Because the members of Congress, Democrats, and some Republicans, they came armed for bear. They had specific document numbers, specific redactions, pointed questions, and Bondi just sat there and gave these vague, evasive non-answers.
But here's the real shift, the part that shows the ground is moving. The political fallout is now coming from her own side.
That's what jumped out at me, too. This isn't just the opposition party criticizing her. You have figures like Cat Turd and Benny Johnson. These are massive influencers in the mega-yacht space, and they are turning on her.
They're openly saying, we voted for truth and transparency, and you're giving us a deep state cover-up.
Because the base knows. The public knows. You can't gaslight millions of people on this anymore. And when you have a sitting congressman like Thomas Massie coming out and saying what he said, well, the game is up.
Let's be very specific about what Thomas Massie found. He went into the SCIF, the secure facility. He looked at the documents with his own eyes.
Right.
And he came out and said that the Department of Justice is actively taking down documents after producing them to Congress.
Just pause and think about that. They showed the documents, realized, oops, that's too damaging, and then literally pulled them back from the congressional servers.
That's obstruction of justice.
It is the definition of obstruction of justice. And Massie mentioned one photo in particular that is just an absolute bombshell.
A photo of Epstein in a room.
In a room surrounded by boxes. And on the boxes, clear as day, is the word CIA.
CIA written on the boxes, in Jeffrey Epstein's possession.
If that photo exists, and the DOJ showed it to Congress and then pulled it back, that confirms everything. It confirms the proof of affiliation we started with. Epstein didn't just work for them. He had the files. He had the boxes. He was the archive for the blackmail operation.
And speaking of archives and the money that flows around them, we have to talk about Leon Black.
Oh, yeah.
We have reporting on this from Sabby Sabs and also from the Daily Beast. The number itself is just staggering. Mm-hmm. $158 million.
$158 million paid from Leon Black to Jeffrey Epstein, supposedly for tax and estate planning.
Come on.
I don't care how good your accountant is. I don't care if he can make you pay zero taxes for the rest of your life. Nobody pays $158 million for tax advice.
Unless that advice is how to hide the fact that I own you.
It's blackmail money. It's hush money. It has to be. But the connection here that sends a real chill down your spine, it isn't even the money. It's the company.
Leon Black is the billionaire founder of Apollo Global Management.
Right. And Apollo, through its various holdings, owns a company called Life Touch.
And if you're a parent listening to this, you almost certainly know that name, even if you don't realize it. Life Touch.
They own the school photography contracts for a huge portion of America.
Elementary schools, middle schools, high schools. Picture day.
Think about the data. Just think about the sheer volume of data they collect. We are talking about high-resolution photographs, full names, school locations, grade levels, and ages of millions and millions of American children.
And that database is owned by a company controlled by a man who paid Jeffrey Epstein $158 million.
The implication is, it's almost too dark to contemplate.
What is the implication?
The implication is that this is a database,
Yeah.
a catalog. If you're building a generational blackmail operation, one that will last for the next 20 or 30 years, you don't just want today's politicians.
You want the data on their kids, you want access, you want to track them.
This is the industrialization of compromise. It's creating a supply chain for future blackmail.
It's not just about the kids, though, is it? It's about what happens to political figures who are already in the system and try to step out of line.
Right. And that brings us to a very heavy topic. We have to discuss the reported death of Charlie Kirk.
This is a tough one. Charlie Kirk, dead at 32.
And the official narrative is already being cemented. The lone gunman. Some troubled, mentally unstable young kid. We've heard this story before.
We've heard it a dozen times. Lee Harvey Oswald. Sirhan. The pattern is always the same. A neat, tidy story that closes the case.
But we've been looking at an analysis from a commentator named Wally Rashid that paints a completely different and much more disturbing picture.
Rashid argues that Charlie Kirk wasn't the victim of a random act. He argues he was killed because he was pivoting.
Exactly. He was moving away from the establishment conservative line and toward a true America First stance, one that started to question the U.S.-Israel relationship.
And that's the third rail of American politics.
It is the third rail. Rashid's analysis is fascinating because he tracks Kirk's trajectory. For years, Kirk was a standard conservative, funded by the usual billionaire donors. But in the last year or so, he started asking dangerous questions.
He started questioning the endless money flow to foreign wars. He started questioning the outsized influence of lobby groups like AIPAC.
He was becoming a problem for the establishment. And the evidence Rashid cites for this assassination theory, he calls it circular, which is an interesting term, but it's compelling.
He starts with the text messages. Kirk sent texts to close friends in the weeks before his death saying, and I quote, "I think they're going to kill me."
You don't send a text like that lightly. That is a person who feels a real and present danger.
And then there was a late-night phone call with a prominent rabbi just hours before the event. The details are murky, but the timing is highly suspicious.
But for Rashid, the real tell, the smoking gun, is what happened after. Look at the aftermath. Look at his wife.
This is the part of Rashid's analysis that is just impossible to ignore. Immediately after her husband's death, she takes over the organization.
And pivots it completely. She goes to meet with Netanyahu. She realigns the entire Turning Point movement back into the standard pro-interventionist, pro-AIPAC fold.
It's a complete 180-degree turn from the direction Charlie was taking it.
Rashid argues this fits a clear pattern of what he calls the industrialist Zionist power struggle. There is a faction in power that absolutely cannot afford to lose the Christian Zionist base in America. That's a power base.
And Kirk was one of the most influential voices for that base.
He was incredibly influential. If he had succeeded in turning that base against the foreign interventionist consensus, he would have become an existential threat to the entire blackmail state.
So on one hand, we have the intelligence agencies desperately covering up their past with Epstein. On the other, we have domestic political figures being silenced when they question the current power structure.
And all of this domestic chaos is happening while the drums of war are beating louder than they have in decades.
They aren't just beating, they are absolutely deafening at this point. We are standing on the brink of a war that could make everything else we've discussed look like a minor skirmish.
Which brings us to Iran.
Let's pivot to segment 3, the brink of war. We're looking at Iran, and the timing here is absolutely critical.
Yes. Today is Sunday, February 15th, as we record this, but Tuesday, February 17th, tomorrow, for all practical purposes, is the day of the scheduled talks in Geneva. Everything hangs on those talks.
And the military context is just terrifying. We have multiple sources, including MSNOW and the veteran analyst Ray McGovern, confirming that a second U.S. aircraft carrier has been deployed to the region.
2 full carrier strike groups. You do not move that kind of naval hardware for a friendly chat. You move it for a war.
So the question is, why now? What's the urgency? And this is where Ray McGovern drops an absolute bombshell revelation about something he calls the timeout.
The timeout. This is the story that the corporate media completely missed or deliberately ignored.
So let's unpack this. According to McGovern's sources, back in June of 2025, so just last year, Israel was nearly obliterated.
That's the word he uses, obliterated. What happened was, in response to an Israeli strike, Iran launched a barrage of their new hypersonic missiles.
And the Israeli defenses?
They failed. Completely. The Iron Dome failed. The Arrow system failed. The missiles got through. For a terrifying few hours, Israel was effectively defenseless against this new technology.
And Trump, seeing this from the White House, realizing the U.S. couldn't stop it either.
He called a timeout, a literal diplomatic timeout. He got on the back channels and effectively told the Iranians, stop, or we are all going down this road together and it ends in a nuclear exchange.
And the Iranians, having made their point that they could penetrate Israeli airspace at will, they stopped.
They stopped, but everyone knew the timeout was temporary. It was a pause, not a peace treaty.
And now the rules of the game have changed again. We're getting reports that Iran has officially changed its nuclear doctrine. They've changed the fatwa.
This is the game changer on the strategic level. For decades, the supreme leader had a religious ruling, a fatwa, against the development of nuclear weapons.
Right.
McGovern reports that this has now been officially shifted. The new doctrine is simple and brutal. If Israel strikes Iran again, Iran will not just respond proportionally. They are now threatening to obliterate the state of Israel.
And they now have the proven hypersonic delivery systems to make that threat credible.
So we have a standoff, a nuclear standoff. Israel is pushing for a strike. Iran is saying, if you do, we end you. And President Trump is caught right in the middle.
Trump is being squeezed. And this brings us directly to the meeting that just happened, or maybe the meeting that barely happened, between Prime Minister Netanyahu and Trump at the White House.
Yeah, this was very, very strange. We're looking at reports from Due Dissidents and, again, Ray McGovern about this supposedly secret meeting.
Netanyahu was at the White House, that's confirmed, but there was no press conference, there was no joint statement, there wasn't even a photo op with the two leaders shaking hands.
In the language of international diplomacy, that is a scream. That is a siren going off. When the Prime Minister of Israel visits the White House and there's zero press availability, it means they were shouting at each other behind closed doors.
Trump, of course, tweeted that it was a very good meeting.
Which is Trump's tell. It means it was a total disaster. He always says very good or perfect when he has to cover up a complete train wreck.
So what's the source of the friction? What were they fighting about?
Trump is looking at the calendar. He's looking at the midterm elections. He's looking at his political legacy. He knows deep down that if he starts a major war with Iran right now, with gas prices already heading toward $10 a gallon, with the U.S. military overstretched, he loses everything. He becomes a one-term president.
But Netanyahu has the opposite problem.
Netanyahu is desperate. His coalition is falling apart. He's facing corruption charges. He needs a war to stay in power in Israel. A war with Iran is his political lifeline.
And here we come back to the deep state connection again, the blackmail, the leverage.
It all comes back to that. Trump is being squeezed by the Epstein leverage. We know from the document dumps and insider reports that foreign intelligence agencies, and it's heavily implied to be Israel and Russia, have copies of the tapes. They have the compromise.
So they have leverage over him.
Tremendous leverage. So Trump is trying to navigate this impossible path where he doesn't get destroyed politically by the blackmail, but he also doesn't get drawn into a civilization-ending nuclear war.
That would explain the strange diplomatic maneuvering we're seeing. He's using the Omanis as intermediaries for these Geneva talks.
He's going around the system. He's bypassing the neocons in his own State Department. He's bypassing the hawks in Congress like Marco Rubio. He's using the Omanis to send a direct back-channel message to Tehran.
And that message is what?
Help me find a way out of this. That's what it is. He's looking for an off-ramp.
But will Iran give him one?
That is the question. And the answer depends entirely on what happens in Geneva on Tuesday. If those talks fail, the timeout is over.
And while all eyes are, rightly, on the Middle East, there's a bizarre and frankly almost comical distraction campaign being waged in Europe.
Oh, this one is. This is one for the history books.
Let's talk about Ukraine and the frog poison.
This is one of those stories where you genuinely have to check if you are reading a report from a serious news agency or from a satire site like The Onion.
We have sources like Alexander Mercouris and Alex Christoforou who follow this region closely, reporting on a breaking story being pushed hard by the UK and Germany.
They are now claiming, years after his death, that the Russian opposition figure Alexei Navalny was killed by Ecuador dart frog poison.
You can't make this stuff up. A rare poison, they claim, from a specific frog found only in Ecuador.
As Alex Christoforou pointed out, the absurdity is just breathtaking. He said something like, so you're telling me the FSB went all the way to Ecuador, found a specific frog, extracted its goo, put it on some kind of dart, and then smuggled that into a high-security Siberian prison to kill a man who was already dying.
It's a dead cat strategy, isn't it?
It is the textbook definition of a dead cat strategy. The term comes from politics. When you are having a disastrous meeting, you can't fix the problem, you throw a dead cat on the table. Everyone will immediately stop talking about the problem and start shouting, my God, there's a dead cat on the table.
The frog poison is the dead cat.
It's the dead cat. Because they need to distract from the real disaster.
Which is?
The total, unmitigated, catastrophic collapse of the Ukrainian front.
Ray McGovern is reporting that the war of attrition has finally reached its end. The front has shifted all the way back to the Dnieper River. It's essentially over.
The Ukrainian army is breaking. They're out of men, out of ammunition. And this distraction is necessary because the Western public has been fed a steady diet of propaganda for 4 years that Ukraine was winning. That victory was just around the corner.
And now they have to explain why President Zelensky is reportedly negotiating the terms of his exile.
We're seeing reports discussing potential locations for him, like Puerto Rico or even Israel. The golden parachute is being prepared.
So the West needs a new narrative. They need to blame Russia for something new and outrageous, hence the frog poison, to justify the next round of sanctions or escalation.
But there is a back channel here too, just like with Iran. And this is the part that might contain a sliver of hope. We're hearing about the Abu Dhabi talks and the Alaska agreements.
Right, confidential negotiations between the U.S. and Russia that are very active.
And they are pointedly bypassing NATO. They are bypassing the Europeans completely. This is Trump and Putin, through their most trusted intermediaries, talking directly in places like Abu Dhabi and Alaska.
And the Europeans know it. And they are furious.
They are beyond furious. Which brings us to the recent Munich Security Conference. We've been looking at analysis from the channel World Affairs in Context.
And by all accounts, it was a diplomatic disaster for the Europeans. Senator Marco Rubio went there and gave a speech that essentially changed the tone of the U.S. relationship with Europe overnight.
He shifted the tone from alliance to empire. That's the analysis.
He effectively stood up and told them, we are the empire. You are the vassals. Your job is to get in line and follow our orders. No more pretense of a partnership of equals.
And the reaction for the European leaders was, from all reports, sheer panic. They feel completely abandoned. They are suddenly realizing that the Pax Americana, the entire post-World War II order where the United States pays for and guarantees Europe's defense, is over.
The European Council on Foreign Relations was even quoted as saying that the post-Cold War order is, quote, finished.
It is finished.
Yeah.
And that forces us to look at the hard economic reality, because you can't run an empire without resources. You can't fight these global conflicts without a secure supply chain.
And that brings us to segment 5, the economic and structural shift that's happening just beneath the surface.
Right. We have a report from the program Redacted about a new initiative called Project Vault.
And this might be the most underreported but most significant story of the entire week.
I agree. The U.S. government just announced a $12 billion strategic reserve for critical minerals.
But not just any minerals. They are laser-focused on one specific element, niobium.
Niobium. Most people have never even heard of it. But it is absolutely essential for advanced military technology. It's used in spacecraft thrusters. It's used in the alloys for hypersonic missiles.
And here are the hard stats, the numbers that tell the whole story. The U.S. currently imports 100% of its niobium.
100%. We produce none of it domestically.
And 90% of that comes from one country, Brazil. There are 0 active niobium mines in the United States.
Now, think about what that means from a strategic perspective. If you are planning for a major global war, a war that would almost certainly cut off global trade routes, you need niobium. You literally cannot build your most advanced weapons without it.
So the fact that the U.S. is suddenly in a panic to stockpile $12 billion worth of this stuff.
It tells you everything. They are preparing for a total decoupling from the global economy. They're preparing for the trade routes to close. This is war preparation, plain and simple, masked as domestic economic policy.
And while they are preparing for a future war, they are actively using economic warfare as a weapon right now. We have to look at the sources from the Majority Report and the program blowback regarding the escalating crisis in Cuba.
This is the silent genocide that is happening just 90 miles off the coast of Florida.
The U.S. has effectively instituted a full energy blockade of Cuba. President Trump is threatening massive tariffs on any company or any country that sends oil to the island.
It's a medieval siege tactic.
Oh.
It's a blockade. And it is causing a humanitarian catastrophe on a scale we haven't seen in this hemisphere for a long time.
No electricity means no water pumps. It means no refrigeration for vital medicines. It means food is spoiling in the heat.
But we are seeing some resistance to this. Russia and Mexico are now attempting to break the blockade. They are sending their own oil tankers.
And this is where it all connects back to the brinkmanship we talked about earlier.
Right. If President Trump gives the order to the U.S. Navy to stop a Russian tanker on its way to Cuba, we have a Cuban Missile Crisis 2.0. Instantly.
But this time, it's not about nuclear missiles pointed at Florida. It's about starvation. It is the raw use of hunger as a weapon of war.
It's a very dangerous game of chicken being played in the Caribbean.
So let's try to bring this all back together. We have covered a truly massive amount of ground today.
We really have. It's a lot to process.
We started with those redacted files from the CIA, which all but proved that Jeffrey Epstein was an intelligence asset, a hyperfixer for the deep state. We talked about the domestic cover-up, where political figures like Charlie Kirk are allegedly assassinated for stepping out of line and questioning the narrative, and where the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, is openly stonewalling Congress to protect these dark secrets.
And we connected that directly to the international stage. Those blackmail files, that leverage, it isn't just sitting in a safe somewhere. It appears to be actively used to pressure the U.S. president into a war with Iran.
A war that he knows he cannot win, a war he doesn't want, but one he might be forced into by the very people holding the tapes.
And all the while, the Ukrainian front collapses in the background. A disaster, distracted by these absurd stories about frog poison.
While the U.S. quietly stockpiles rare earth minerals for a future global conflict and simultaneously starves its neighbor, Cuba, into submission.
The pattern is clear. When you lay it all out like that, the pattern is unmistakable. The blackmail isn't just about controlling individuals anymore. It's about controlling nations.
The United States itself is being leveraged.
We are being steered into conflicts that do not serve the interests of the American people. They serve the interests of a global elite. The same elite, by the way, that was flying on Epstein's jet and visiting his island.
So after all of this, what does this all mean for you, for the listener, trying to make sense of this chaos?
It means you need to pay very, very close attention to what happens on Tuesday.
That's the one thing you need to remember this week, the takeaway. Watch the Geneva talks on Tuesday, February 17th.
If those talks fail, if the Omani intermediaries can't bridge the gap between Trump and Tehran, then the timeout that was called last June is officially over.
And we are looking at a war that will make the last 20 years in Iraq and Afghanistan look like a minor skirmish.
The aircraft carriers are already in place. The hypersonic missiles are ready to fly. The blackmail is active. Tuesday is the breaking point.
It's a terrifying thought, but as we always say, knowledge is power.
It is. And the only way to break the cycle of blackmail is to drag all of it, every last ugly secret, into the light. And that's why we do this.
Absolutely. If you found this analysis valuable, if you want to stay ahead of the curve and understand the real forces shaping our world, hit the plus or follow button on your podcast app and give us a like.
And subscribe to the Hot News channel for more deep dives.
We will be watching Geneva with you very closely, and we will be back to break down the fallout. Until we meet again, goodbye.
Stay vigilant. Question everything. Goodbye.